So hello again, everyone. Welcome to the next in our series of remote video broadcasts that we're bringing you every day now from Travel Weekly, trying to keep you all connected while we are largely now working from home. And I'm joined today by three experts in their field. So I've got Bob Morrell from Reality Training. I've got Ian Brooks from Gail Recruitment. And I've got Matt Parker, who is from tech specialist Babble. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us today. We thought it was time to we're all trying to get used to this new way of working. People will have been in their homes to varying amounts of time and for different reasons. But let's just start with you, Matt, if I may, because obviously we're trying to get to grips with this new technology. We're doing this call today on a platform called Zoom, which I had never heard of until about 2 weeks ago. But I'm finding it a very good way to stay connected, but I haven't really explored any other ways. I just wondered, as someone who's, very an expert in technology and communications and keeping people connected, what would be your advice to people working from home? Is this video call a good idea, and are there different platforms we could be looking at?
Thanks, Lucy, and hi everyone. I think that there's lots of different ways about thinking about this and the approach that you can take. We are Microsoft Teams bigots in our business, and we deployed teams across our organisation a year ago, and to be honest, haven't really used it in anger until the last couple of weeks. And I think that, using technology effectively, we've got this thing in our business about using technology effectively being about behavioural change rather than tech change. There aren't really any of the tools that we're using today that we couldn't have used a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. I mean, Skype video has been around for as long as, but I think that there's a whole question around, are we happy being videoed? Are we happy being able to see ourselves on the screen when we're talking to somebody else? We're doing weekly town halls with the staff and updating them on what's going on across our business. We've got 90 people who were in 4 locations who are now in 90 locations. And we're doing weekly town halls, and we're having to drive some behavioural change across the organisation around the use of tech. So we've now said, for an internal call on Teams, your default answer has to be the video goes on. Because people are very good at, I've just had a call with our CTO that I've cut off to come on here, and he's clearly not in the place that he normally does his call from, which is it's not the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's a nice clean environment behind him, and I'm assuming he's in his kitchen making toast or doing something, and all of a sudden there's no video there. And I think that there are numerous different ways you can think about it from a tech perspective, but I would urge people to think about it from a behavioural perspective, that actually, you don't worry about what's behind you when you're standing chatting to somebody in the office, or when you bump into somebody in a hallway or in a lift. Why is it any different when you're doing things remotely? And the sooner that we get back to this feeling normal, and not worrying about the other stuff that's going on. We have this whole thing across our organisation. Well, I'm not really presentable for video. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's you, it's there, it's you I want to talk to, and it's you I want to engage with. The last thing on my mind is, you haven't brushed your hair, you haven't got a tie on, you haven't put your makeup on, whatever it is, it's about engagement and communicating. And I genuinely don't think the tool matters. I think it's all about behaviour.
Okay, that's really interesting, because of course people are wondering whether they should get dressed for work or whether they should just work in their pajamas. I mean, I've called a couple of people a bit early, and I've caught them with towels in their heads. They've just got out of the shower. These are people in my team, so it's okay. But maybe we could talk to you, Bob, because I know you have been doing some of your own online videos, and you've been putting out advice. You do a lot of training for travel agents in the travel industry, and I know you've worked with home workers before. So for some people, this is not a new phenomenon. But in terms of, if you haven't done it before, you're used to being in a busy office, maybe in a high street, or you're busy, or wherever you are in a call centre, and all of a sudden you are on your own at home, and you've got to suddenly set up an office space. Do you need to do that? And should you get up and get dressed and put your makeup on? Perhaps you can give us some what you've been telling people.
I mean, I should have put some of mine on earlier, but no, I think what Matt says is absolutely right. It is behavioural. And what is interesting is that we have had these technologies for ages, and I was the same as you, Lou. So I hadn't used Zoom before a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm using it every day. So, I mean, that's an incredible change in a very short space of time. But I think the other behavioural shift, which is actually quite interesting, is that we're doing lots of stuff about how to run remote meetings, how to have lots of people on a meeting at once and that kind of thing. And there's lots of tips that will help people do that. But over time, then this becomes the new normal. And I think, you know, when I look back about a year or so ago, we were already developing training for contact centers where when you ring into a contact center, they can send you a link and you can see the person you're speaking to in the contact center and have a face-to-face conversation. So that technology is also here. And all that's going to happen, I think, is that this will just speed that up. And when we do go back to some semblance of normality, then you're going to have people who can actually engage like this over a camera, which is a bit different. And that will be a big shift. So in some ways, this is just speeding up that.
This is not a temporary thing, you think, just for this period. You expect it to remain. In fact, actually, Will Waggett was on at one of these yesterday, former TUI, and he was saying absolutely people would not go back. They will now be selling and doing everything but via video. So he thinks it's here to stay. Let's bring Ian in. Ian, I mean, obviously, we're here for different reasons at home, aren't we? Like, we're all at home working. Which is obviously for a lot of people that's the case, but some people unfortunately are at home for different reasons, because some have been made redundant because of this situation, and we're increasingly writing stories now about travel industry or travel companies putting their staff on temporary furloughed leave. This is just like Zoom. I didn't know the word furloughed until a couple of weeks ago. So and now I'm saying it in regular parlance. So what would you advise people who are now at home? They might be working, but they might also be not allowed to work or haven't got a job. So is there anything they could be doing in this time, Ian? What would you be advising those different groups of people?
Yes, definitely. So I guess, first of all, Lucy, the first thing I'd like to say is that those people that have been furloughed, this is a good thing. It's a good thing from the employer's perspective, because it means that probably the biggest cost in their business, which is their staff overheads, it means they've been able to take some shelter from that overhead whilst they've got no income coming in. So that's good news from the employer's perspective, and it means that, you know, more travel companies have got a better chance of surviving this. You know, with no income coming in now, and probably no income for quite a few months going forward. So I think it's a really good thing. It's a really good thing the government's done. It's a good thing if you're an employee to have been furloughed, because that's so much better than being made redundant. It means that, you know, as soon as we return to a degree of normality and your role is going to be needed in the organization, you come straight back. It's not, you know, your employment status remains the same. It's not a permanent break. So I think, you know, to be furloughed is a good thing, and nobody should think there should be no you know, self unappreciation or doubt if you've been furloughed. It's a good thing to have happened. It's interesting, if you look at the definition of furloughing, it says to be laid off or a leave of absence. But also when you sort of scroll down on some of the other descriptions, it says rest and recuperation. So actually, you know, maybe there is a bit of that. You know, we all work incredibly hard, and it's unusual to get some time off. So certainly, yeah, take some of that time to rest and recuperate, and you know, and get your creativity going again, and get your strength back. That's important. But I would also say to people, sorry, and by the way, if you've been made redundant recently, I would recommend, if you were still working in February and you got made redundant in March, I would go back to your employer and say, please, can you reconsider my redundancy, and could you consider furloughing me instead of making me redundant? Because actually the employer is not really going to be much worse off. I think some people are unaware of this, that you can furlough people after they've already been made redundant. So
that's what happened with Cooney, of course, because Cooney made 70 people redundant, but then was able to bring them back in with this staff retention scheme. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, so definitely do that. And we've had some quite sad cases where we've had candidates that were about to start new jobs. They've handed their notice in, you know, they're working their notice, they're about to start their new job, and then the employer said, sorry, we can't take you on because, you know, we can't afford you. And again, you know, saying to those people, go back to your previous employer, and if you had a good relationship and you were a good leaver, you know, ask them if they can continue your employment and furlough you, because there's no real extra cost to them. So I think that's important. But you know, use the time constructively. You might like to learn a new skill. You might, for example, there are lots of online courses that you can do that are not particularly expensive. You might want to learn how to do social media a little bit more professionally, or you might work for an online business and like to know a little bit about how to program. You know, there are basic programming courses. I'm not saying that you want to become a computer programmer, but you might want to learn the basics behind it, see how it works, or maybe learn a new language. Or if you're working in a travel agency and you're a specialist in the Mediterranean, maybe, you know, do some research on a new destination and learn up about different destinations in the world. I think there's lots that you can do whilst you've got this time on your hands.
Okay, let's pick up on that for 2 points actually, because I want to come to Matt in a minute about sort of social media and other ways of communicating. But just to pick up on the training thing, Bob, I mean, that's what you do. You're helping people to train either in selling skills, but also, you know, presumably, you know, what Ian's point around sort of actual product knowledge. So what are you offering, any courses, or are you advising people to do that kind of thing?
I think at the moment, I mean, Ian's absolutely right. People should definitely take whatever online courses are available. And I know that the travel industry has some superb online training companies for destination knowledge in particular. So they should definitely take advantage of that. I think the thing that we're finding is we do a lot of executive coaching, which sounds quite highfalutin, but it isn't. It's for anyone, really. And in the last few weeks, we've had all level of travel people that we've been speaking to. And what coaching does is help people to get their minds around what's going on, help them to form strategies and ideas about how they can best move forward. And we have a number of coaches that we have in our team. It's one-to-one stuff. It can be done like this over the internet, and it's really effective. And I think if you're someone who is struggling to kind of make plans for the future, then I think coaching is a great way to go, because most of us struggle when it comes to uncertainty. And so a bit of coaching through this period might very well help that. When it comes to actual training, we're able to do a certain amount of training over the internet. I mean, something like this, you can definitely train maybe up to 10 people fairly effectively for shortish periods. You couldn't do a whole day like this, I think. But there are ways that you can use the internet to train effectively. But yes, there are hundreds of online courses, and there's some really good films that are completely free on YouTube as well, on all sorts of great subjects.
Okay, great. All right. Well, maybe we'll get those links from you, Bob, and put them on our website later. Matt, obviously, Ian made the point there that this is, or Bob did as well. It's because we don't know when this is going to end. Obviously, it's difficult to plan all the rest of it. But are you finding that are you advising companies to change some of their technology? I know you're all about integrating different types of technology to help businesses. I mean, Ian mentioned social media there. I mean, are you sort of looking ahead now to try and get people to change the way they work? I don't just mean individuals at home, but I mean businesses. Should they be looking at different ways of working? Because let's be honest, this could go on for, we just don't know.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've spent, the business has been around for knocking on 20 years, for a large part of that, selling internet-based communication solutions. You know, we are, highfalutin is a good way of describing it. I don't want it to sound that way, but you know, we're at towards the cutting edge of what's doable and what's available. And what we tended to find is that organisations are deploying the bare minimum and saying, well, we don't need that, we don't need that, we don't need that. And we find these bizarre conversations with people where, well, I don't want to pay £2, £2 a month for an employee to have a soft phone so they've got access to the internal comm system or the chat or to the contact centre solution remotely. And that's, I've always struggled with that. You know, the amount of money that an employee costs and the amount that you invest in that person every month, another £2, another £3, another £5 is neither here nor there. What we're seeing is organisations all of a sudden realising that they've got something that will help them, but they've just never actually deployed the bit that's going to make the biggest impact. And I think that culturally we have this thing about, you know, working from home. Which, you know, every time anybody says that, there's always a wry smile in the room, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation where, you know, the reality is we're working from home, and we're going from a situation where we allow our employees and our colleagues to do it to a situation where we want them to do it and we want them to embrace it, and providing, you know, we're in this bizarre situation which I describe as feeling uncomfortably smug, because we're busier than we've ever been. You know, March was a record month for our business by a big, you know, the second biggest month isn't one that we can remember. There's such a big, and it's because all of a sudden organisations are doing the catch up. So the ones that are in the fortunate place are the ones that have already moved to the cloud and just haven't deployed the little pieces that make a difference. So we're working with them, but it goes back to the start of this. We can deliver the technology and we can deliver it fairly quickly. And we've had, you know, we've had a situation with a call center, a contact center client in point of sale type solutions, who has taken 140 people from a contact center in Berlin, and they're all working they go home one night from the office, the next day they're all working from home with no downtime, no outage. But for me, the tech bit's the easy piece of that, because, you know, I wasn't ready for this session. It took me 2 minutes to download the Zoom app because it does it for me. You know, you've sent me a link, I click on the link, it tells me what to do, I'm there. The difference is I'm prepared to turn my video on, I'm prepared to engage, and it comes back to the behavioural piece. And we're finding that we're spending more energy at the moment talking to people about how they get their staff to embrace this sort of stuff. And I think, you know, that there's a group that have always done this sort of thing, and there's a group that just haven't. And I think there's a generational thing as well. If I have 2 teenagers in the house who don't do anything on video. They watch videos all day long, and they send people videos. You know, I've got a 17-year-old son who, God knows how many 3-second videos he sends to his mates that he finds incredibly amusing every day. But he never talks to them. They don't speak to each other. They don't talk on the phone. They don't talk on video. So whilst, sorry, I've just done something a bit thick here.
Brilliant.
Love that little interlude. Well, let's pick up, while you sort that out, Matt, let's pick up with Bob, because you must see these kind of...
We've seen some real change in the behavioural side of things with people.
Playing heavy rock music in the middle of videos.
That's great.
What I was going to say, Matt, you make a really good point about it being a sort of generational thing. Probably, you know, and you're having to advise
something that I shouldn't have pressed.
Okay.
That sorted it out. Is that any better?
Sounds fine.
I can hear
Sorry,
you.
guys.
Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you fine. Sorry, I pressed something while I was just gesticulating. So I think there's a whole behavioural thing. There's a generational thing. There's a cultural thing. I think the tech can deliver what it needs to deliver. The question is whether organisations are driving adoption and helping people. You know, helping people embrace the environment that they're now having to work in and the impact that that's having in their lives. You know, people are at home, their families are around. It is inevitable that there's going to be interruptions. It is inevitable that people are going to get distracted. And we with our staff, we're trying to encourage them to do that. Take for every hour that you spend at your desk, go and spend an hour with your family. That is equally important. You're going to end up working longer days because it's, you know, there's the whole human guilt complex. So I think there's a whole level of complexity around how we adopt, embrace, and how we live with this longer term. The comment that Ian made earlier on, you know, the world has changed, and the world has changed in lots and lots of ways. And I don't think any of us will go back to the way that we were working a month ago at the end of this. I really don't. Every single one of us will change the way we're doing things.
Okay, let's pick up on your point about the adoption and different people finding it easier than others. Bob, have you found, I mean, you must be talking to all sorts of different organisations, different people within that. Are you having to treat people very differently in terms of getting them on board? Matt says the technology is there, but it's getting people to understand how to use it and feel comfortable with it.
Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff we do is entirely behavioural, and I think a contact centre is a perfect example. Some people in contact centres would not want to be on a system like this, looking at someone that they're trying to sell something to. Okay, that's just not part of that. They're just not confident enough to have that kind of conversation. So I think that's a behavioural thing which is going to change over time. But there's fantastic software now that allows you to see someone face to face and move the products and services you're selling from your screen onto their screen. I mean, there's some amazing things that you can do now, which makes it much more user-friendly, and again, will just enhance the way it works, but also make people want to do it more. But also, to be able to do it from home is going to save a fortune, isn't it?
Yeah, my question was going to be that, you know, if you're a business owner, should you be investing in this kind of technology? Or, I mean, Matt's has had the best month ever, but I mean, people have got no income. So there's a rub there, isn't there? Because they want to prepare for the future. You're all saying that this is, you know, this is going to be here to stay, and we've got to be thinking of working in this way going forward. But, you know, people haven't got money to spend on anything at the moment because people have got their revenue is dried up by and large. So how do you balance that?
Well, I mean, that's a separate question really, because I know that many businesses are trying to work out how they get just to the end of this break, which we don't know how long it's going to be, and I totally understand that. It's the uncertainty is the hardest thing. But we know it's uncertain. We know it's going to be that way. I think there's a lot to be said for planning how you come out of this, because there's nothing you can do about now. We speak to a lot of people, a lot of managers in particular, who love certainty. They love to know what's happening, and they love to have plans and targets, etc. All of that's gone. Any target you had 6 weeks ago, it doesn't exist anymore. And so we have to understand that the way we manage our businesses has to change to survive. But then once we come out of this, how are we going to run them in the future? We cannot go back to the way it was. And a very good point, which I thought of when Matt was speaking, I know that IBM encouraged their staff to work from home because they know that 4 hours work done at home, actually working at home for 4 hours, is the equivalent of a day in the office. Now, once you understand that, then actually it doesn't matter how traditional your business is. If you think, right, I'm going to get a day's work out of someone for 4 hours at home, then you're going to be pushing them to work at home. But it's that understanding which people need to get their heads around, because there are costs that you can save within a strategy like that.
I mean, Ian, bringing you in, I mean, you're placing candidates all the time with different companies, and flexible working has been on the rise for a long time, hasn't it? So I guess as an employer, they are getting more used to having people not in front of them, you know, in an office 9 till 5 every day anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, yes, they are, Lucy, and we're big advocates of flexible working, and we push it hard with our clients. But I have to say, you know, there were still a lot of companies out there who might say that they embrace flexible working, but the reality is that they don't. And it very much normally comes down to the MD or the CEO of the business and their own particular personal view on that. But as you've just been saying, I do think that you know what is happening now is going to change those opinions, because previously sometimes senior executives will say, yes, of course we allow flexible working, but it doesn't really work. I like people in the office. We don't get the same, efficiency. And now, of course, with this happening, that argument will fall away. But I do think it's important to remember the value of social networking, and I'm not talking about Facebook or anything like that. I'm talking about staff being able to communicate with people at work, and groups, little groups that get created, and how people release their frustrations by talking to their colleagues about what's happening at work. Those work groups are really important, and I think it's important to encourage those to continue in a virtual reality. So in terms of our business, we already moved to flexible working over a year ago, and ditched the office last year anyway. But we tried to meet up once a week, just because it's important to see people, and we try and have a social event once a month. But now what we're doing on a Friday, we're having a happy hour at 4 o'clock on a Friday. Now most of our staff have been furloughed, so they're not working anymore. There's no recruitment to do. Everything is on hold. But we think it's important that we just have that camaraderie amongst our team. So we have a little happy hour at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon for half an hour with everybody, and we just chat about what they're doing, not about work, but just to maintain that social element, because I think that's really important, particularly people who are isolating on their own.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think there's been some questions over if you are furloughed, are you allowed to have contact still? Because clearly you have to not be providing a service, I think is the phrase they use. You're not allowed to provide a service to your employer, but there's nothing to say you can't just, as you've pointed out there, Ian, come in and have a chat and be kept up to date and keep, chatting to your colleagues, because you are still a member of the staff, aren't you? You're still a member of the team. So you would encourage, and I really wanted to pick up on the point you made right at the start, because you said there's no sort of shame or any kind of feeling of being undervalued by being furloughed. So people should feel that they are still part of things, and they should come on to calls, and they should still be engaged. Is that, you would recommend that?
Well, yeah, I think, you need to differentiate between, if you're working on a project and it's a call about an update on a project, that would be inappropriate, because that's real work. But if it was, if it was a company town hall, for example, or if it was just a group that used to meet socially, then those things should be encouraged.
Okay, all right, you're nodding, Bob, so that you've been thinking the same, have you?
You've got to, if it's the only way you can keep in contact, this is a great way of doing it. Socially, I've had a number of parties on this over the last couple of weeks, and frankly, they've been just as convivial as they would have been face-to-face. So in that sense, it's been pretty effective. I don't know about a Friday one. I've got a team in my house here with me, which is why I've covered it up, by the way, you don't want to see it, of two boys and my wife. We have a daily end of day sort of team building session, so I think whatever your team is, you still need to do that kind of trivial fun stuff to keep it going, and why not do it on something like this? So I think that's all very, very important, and I do accept Ian's point. I think it is a good point. If you are furloughed and are being paid not to work, that doesn't mean you can't keep in touch and show an interest. I think that's a fair enough point.
Okay, and just back to you, Matt, because you talked about the tech is all there. That's not the problem. It's a behavioural thing, but you also talked about having a really busy month. So, and that question on cost, just to come back to that, is it possible to, I guess, upgrade or, do all these things that you talked about that are there and available and probably people need now, and some of them are early adopters and some are a bit late to it, but is it possible to get up to speed fairly quickly at a reasonable or low cost?
So the short answer is yes, and the last thing I want to be doing is any sort of sales pitch on here. But what we've been doing with the clients that we've inherited through the acquisitions that are using traditional tech is we're putting them on cloud-based applications which solve the problem for them with with no expenditure in the first 12 months. So as the question was being, I hadn't thought about this. You know, we've tended to do that, or up till now, we've only done that with existing customers. But I guess given the travails and the challenges that are faced across the travel industry, we'd be happy to do that for anybody who's seen this or anybody that wants to talk to us about it. So, you know, the way this stuff works is it's pay as you consume. It's monthly fees for it. There isn't a big capital investment, and all of our clients that we've moved from traditional, you know, hardware based comms systems. Everybody that we've done with that, we've made it easy for them to make the decision by saying, right, for the first 12 months you'll pay nothing at all. So, and it's, you know, that's what we've been doing. I suspect that's one of the reasons that we're as busy. It's in our interest long term as a business to do that, because once people move, you know, everybody on the call said that the world has changed. People aren't going back. They're not going to go back to the way they were doing it before.
Okay, so there's a deferred payment option so that you can get up and running, get ready for the future, but you haven't got to actually have the outlay now, which is excellent.
You're not spending any money for the next 12 months.
Okay. We're just coming up, I guess, to shortly towards the end of time. We've talked a lot about staying in touch with your company, with your employees, so internally. What about in terms of speaking to your customers? I mean, who aren't wanting to be sold to, clearly, I guess, at the moment, but that whole kind of customer engagement piece and making sure you're still front of mind, I guess, or you're still their trusted travel supplier or travel agent, or, you know, is that something that, you know, you would encourage? And if so, what platforms or what methods would you be advising people to use if they are wanting to retain that customer contact? Bob, you're nodding. Do you want to start us off?
Well, what we're doing as a training company, and we don't just work in travel, we work in lots of other sectors. A lot of our training has been deferred, as you would expect it to be. We're still doing lots of coaching, but what we're doing in the meantime is we're doing lots of how-to guides and tips, top tips. People love all that kind of thing, and short bits of advice. We've also, at risk of plugging it, created a new book, The Perfect Storm, 30 Ways to Drive Your Business, which is available on Kindle. But again, we're doing lots of stuff that people can self-help with over time. And on Fridays, we do free coaching. So I've had a number of people from the travel industry who've been booking in sessions for those sessions and just talking about where they are. They're all at different stages, all at different types of organization. But that at least gives them some assistance one-to-one in terms of planning and thinking about more short-term goals. So again, it's about doing lots of free stuff, because you're right, no one's going to be throwing money around at the moment. But if you're able to do it, I think it's that assistance which is going to help people to the other side. And you know, why not?
And if you're in the business of selling holidays, like we've seen lots of, initially we didn't see any activity at all, but I guess we're seeing now, you know, people putting out virtual tours of destinations, or they're sending out some inspirational things. I've seen travel agents posting pictures of their favorite holiday destination. So, you know, it went very quiet for a while, but now people are trying to, I guess, just, as I say, keep it front of mind, reminding people as well that there is a world out there. It's not available at the moment, but it will presumably at some point, the borders will be opened again and we will be allowed to travel. So, you know, is that a good thing to be doing, to be, you know, just being there? And if so, what's the best method? Is it through social media? I've seen a lot on Twitter, Facebook, etc. Or should you, you know, or should you be inviting people into these kind of calls if they're your best customers? I mean, how could you keep that engagement up? I mean, I don't know, Matt, whether you've been encouraging anybody to use different types of technology in terms of reaching the customer at the moment.
I mean, I think the reality, our situation at Babble is slightly different in that the bulk of what we're doing is B2B, and most of what we're doing at the moment is reactive.
Right.
You know, we've from a marketing perspective, we've asked the team to focus on stuff that will be seen as being helpful rather than as than any sort of sales pitch. So
right.
How do you think this? How do you think about that? What are
Yeah.
you doing? I think the stuff that's being covered on furloughs and the options around that, and I think there's an inordinate amount of misinformation that's being pushed out by some of the general media channels that is not helpful. There was a piece on, I want to say the BBC, but I might be wrong, on the BBC website the other day, talking about Newcastle United staff being told that they had to go and apply for the job retention scheme. It's like, it's irresponsible that sort of message is out there. So for us, trying to do some broadcast around stuff that can be seen as being useful to consume, and we're seeing lots and lots of that from our partners. In terms of our customers, I think just being there and being available and being prepared to communicate. My view is that lots of people are going to be sat at their desks at home at times, not so much looking for stuff to do, but looking for stuff to do that doesn't feel like it's a grind. So learning and education, as Bob and Ian talked about, trying to absorb some sort of education, some sort of information, new skills, all of that sort of stuff, I think is key. And just being there when someone wants to talk to you, I think is really key.
And presumably, Ian, just to finish off, people are uncertain. There are people who are, probably a bit frightened even. I mean, there's a whole range of emotions going on. So presumably all this stuff around technology and training and keeping busy, that must be good as to help you remain positive.
Yeah, I think so. And whilst there aren't any sort of new jobs around at the moment, it's certainly a good time, I think, for people to reflect in terms of their careers. Maybe they're in a rut. Maybe they've been doing the same role for a long time. Maybe this break is when you start thinking about, is this really what I want to do with my life? And so I think there will be some people who end up doing something very different after this experience. If you've got time in your hands, have a look at your CV. Give that a refresh. A lot of people make the same mistake with their CV. Actually, they just keep on adding on to what they've already put. Why don't you just start afresh, get a clean sheet of paper and start a new CV. Be proactive on your LinkedIn. A lot of people do a great CV but don't change their.
Oh, we've lost you.
Oh,
Ian, we've lost you. Oh, Ian, you there? You just froze for a second.
Oh.
You were just saying about they do update their CVs, but then sometimes don't update their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. I mean, your LinkedIn profile probably these days is more important than your CV. So don't forget that, and make sure the two are in sync. And and start building your network on LinkedIn. Maybe start building some connections, etc. So there's always things to do.
And of course, we're reporting a lot on people in travel who've been furloughed who are now volunteering, of course, in this at the moment, which
Fantastic.
is a
Amazing.
fantastic thing to do. So
amazing.
All right. Well, listen, guys, we could carry. Oh, Bob, did you want to make another point?
I just want to say one more thing, if I may, Luce, because I think I know a lot of travel agents. I know these guys will too, and I know just about every travel agent out there. And I know some brilliant travel agents who are still sending out positive stuff into their marketplace right now. Even though it's hell on earth, they're still trying. And I think if you're a decent agent, you'll be okay. It'll be tough, but you'll get there and you'll be okay, because we're still going to need decent agents at the end of this. No doubt about that. And I'm sure they're very appreciative, Luce, of everything that you and your guys are doing.
Oh, that's a nice
I'm
thing.
sure it makes a difference.
Okay, well, listen, you've all been really brilliant today. I'm sure people will watch this and find some nuggets in there that will help them through whichever situation they are in. I can't thank you enough for your time. We'll say goodbye to you all now, but maybe get you on again in a couple of weeks' time, see where we are then. But for now, thank you to Bob and to Ian and to Matt, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Yes, guys.
Lucy.
Thank you.